In the dim glow of lanterns on a cold November night in 1918, two men crept into the basement of Holy Rosary Catholic Church in Isadore, Michigan. Father Edward Podlichevsky and Sexton Jacob Flees carried a potato fork and shovels, their breath visible in the frigid air. What they discovered beneath the dirt floor would unravel a mystery that had haunted this tight-knit Polish immigrant community for 11 years. The bones they unearthed belonged to Sister Mary Janina, a vivacious young nun who had vanished without a trace on August 23, 1907. But this discovery held an even more shocking secret. Cradled within the skeletal remains was the tiny form of a fetus. In that moment, Father Edward knew this revelation could destroy everything the devout community had built. Before we dive deeper into this haunting case that rocked a small Michigan town, make sure to like this video and subscribe. This is a story that will stay with you long after it ends. What happened to Sister Janina during those final moments? Who was responsible for her death? And how did an entire community silence nearly allow the perfect crime? Friday, August 23, 1907, dawned as baking day in the village of Isadore, Michigan. This Polish immigrant settlement operated on strict weekly schedules. Washing, ironing, mending, churning, baking, and cleaning each had their designated days. The morning air carried the promise of another sweltering summer day as the community went about their carefully ordered routines. Sister Mary Janina was born Josephine Mazek, the third child of Jan and Josephine Mazek, who had immigrated from Poland in the late 1800s. Tragedy struck early when both parents died, leaving 9-year-old Josephine orphaned. She was sent to live with the Felician nuns in Detroit, where she discovered her gifts for music, learning piano and developing a beautiful singing voice that would later enchant the forests around Isadore. At 18, Josephine took her religious vows in 1901, becoming Sister Mary Janina. Unlike the typical reserved demeanor expected of nuns, Sister Janina possessed an outgoing, vivacious personality that made her beloved by the 200 students at Holy Rosary School. She had arrived in August 1906 to serve as the school's leader, and her unconventional approach to religious life, singing while walking through the woods, engaging warmly with students, sometimes raised eyebrows among the more conservative community members. That fateful Friday morning, Father Andrew Bieniawski prepared for a fishing expedition to Carp Lake with his sister, Susan, and Gruba, their chore boy. The three teaching sisters, Janina, Angelina, and Josephine, had decided to remain at the church over summer break rather than return to Detroit. All three suffered from tuberculosis and found the northern Michigan air beneficial for their afternoon naps. Sister Janina announced her intention to retrieve paper flower decorations from the church's basement cellar before retiring to her cell for rest. It was a routine task, nothing that would raise concern among her fellow sisters. She left her most precious possessions, her rosary beads and prayer book, on her windowsill, items she normally carried everywhere. But Stella Lipczynska, the sharp-tongued housekeeper, harbored deep resentment toward Sister Janina. Stella frequently complained to parishioners about the young nun, saying, "That one is no good as a nun. Her duties go unfinished." What particularly infuriated Stella was witnessing Dr. Fralick and Father Andrew attending to Sister Janina alone in her room, a practice strictly forbidden for nuns. When Sisters Angelina and Josephine awoke from their afternoon rest, Sister Janina was nowhere to be found. Her abandoned rosary and prayer book on the windowsill immediately alarmed them. Sister Janina never went anywhere without these sacred items. The sisters began searching the church grounds, calling her name through the corridors and checking every possible location where she might have gone. By evening, when Father Andrew's fishing party returned, Sister Mary Janina had completely vanished, leaving behind only questions and the eerie silence of her empty cell. The disappearance of Sister Mary Janina sent shockwaves through the close-knit Polish community of Isadore. Father Andrew Bieniawski immediately organized search parties, mobilizing parishioners to comb through the dense Michigan forests and swamplands where Sister Janina loved to walk and sing. Her melodious voice had often echoed through these woods, but now they remained hauntingly silent. The initial searches proved fruitless. Sister Janina seemed to have vanished without leaving a single trace. Father Andrew, desperate to find his missing colleague, spared no expense in hiring additional help. He brought in a bloodhound to track any scent trails and even consulted a clairvoyant, hoping supernatural insight might succeed where conventional methods had failed. The clairvoyant claimed to see visions of Sister Janina being held captive in a home near Glen Lake. Acting on this information, the Empire Sheriff conducted a thorough search of the described property but found absolutely nothing. The psychic's predictions proved as empty as the searched house. A full week passed before Sheriff Kanukin officially joined the investigation. By then, speculation ran rampant through the community. Some villagers whispered that Sister Janina had simply abandoned her religious vows and fled. A mysterious buggy had been spotted in the area on August 23rd, fueling theories that she had arranged her own escape from religious life. The Polish immigrant community faced a terrible dilemma. They had traveled across Lake Michigan from Milwaukee, seeking religious freedom and economic opportunity. Their survival depended on unity and their unwavering faith. Scandal could destroy everything they had built together. The Polish-American Insurance Company, Polish National Alliance, and Polish Union had provided the financial and moral foundation for their new lives in Michigan. Father Andrew's fishing alibi seemed solid. He had been miles away at Carp Lake when Sister Janina disappeared. Multiple witnesses, including his sister Susan and the chore boy Gruba, confirmed his whereabouts. But questions lingered about others who remained at the church that day. Stella Lipchinska's harsh criticisms of Sister Janina became more scrutinized. Parishioners remembered her bitter complaints, her obvious resentment toward the young nun's unconventional behavior. Some recalled how Stella had openly questioned Sister Janina's fitness for religious life, spreading gossip that painted the missing nun as irresponsible and unsuitable. As days turned to weeks without any sign of Sister Janina, the community began to accept that she might never return. Some secretly believed she had chosen to leave religious life, while others feared something far more sinister had occurred. The truth would remain buried for 11 long years, hidden beneath the very foundation of their sacred church. 11 years later, in the crisp November air of 1918, Father Edward Podlaszewski harbored ambitious dreams for Holy Rosary Church. The newly assigned priest envisioned replacing the modest wooden clapboard structure with a magnificent Roman-style brick church featuring 13 exquisite stained glass windows. These masterpieces, created by Franz Xavier Zettler, a renowned Vatican artist, were being carefully preserved under sawdust in Munich, Germany, waiting for safe passage as World War I had finally ended. But Father Edward had heard disturbing whispers from Bishop Edward Kozlowski about something buried beneath the church. Before construction could begin on his dream cathedral, he needed to ensure the site was clear. The thought of construction crews, or worse, parishioners, discovering anything scandalous filled him with dread. On that fateful November evening, Father Edward approached Sexton Jacob Flees with a secretive request. Together, they would investigate the basement cellar under cover of darkness. Armed with lanterns and a potato fork, the two men descended into the bowels of the wooden church as twilight settled over Isadore. The lanterns cast eerie shadows across the dirt floor as Jacob began probing the packed earth. Their flickering light created dancing specters on the cellar walls, but nothing could have prepared them for what lay beneath. As Jacob's fork struck something hard, both men's hearts raced. Carefully, methodically, they began excavating. What emerged from that cold November soil defied their worst fears. The skeletal remains of Sister Mary Janina lay in the earth like a macabre puzzle, her bones scattered but unmistakably human. Father Edward's hands trembled as he held the lantern closer, confirming his darkest suspicions about the rumors he'd heard. But the discovery held an even more devastating secret. Nestled within Sister Janina's skeletal embrace were the tiny, fragile bones of a fetus. The implications struck both men like lightning. Not only had Sister Janina been murdered, but she had been pregnant at the time of her death. This revelation threatened to destroy the very foundation of their devout community's faith. Jacob carefully gathered the remains, placing Sister Janina's bones and those of the unborn child into a wooden crate. Father Edward's mind raced with the potential consequences. If this discovery became public knowledge, it would create a scandal that could shatter the Polish immigrant community that had worked so hard to establish their religious sanctuary in Michigan. The two men understood the gravity of their situation. This wasn't just about a missing nun who had finally been found. This was about protecting an entire community's faith and reputation. Father Edward made a fateful decision that would haunt him for years to come. He instructed Jacob to secretly bury the crate beneath a large cross in the cemetery, away from prying eyes and curious questions. The scandal must be contained at all costs. Jacob Flees, bound by loyalty to his priest and community, agreed to maintain absolute silence. He wouldn't even tell his wife Mary about what they had discovered in that basement cellar. The carefully guarded secret might have remained buried forever, but fate had other plans. Father Edward's burden of knowledge weighed heavily on his conscience, and he made the decision to confide in Sister Superior Hilaria, the head teacher of the school, and Sister Gaston, the assistant Felician nun. The circle of those who knew about Sister Janina's fate slowly began to expand. Within weeks of the discovery, Father Edward faced another crisis that would ultimately expose the truth. Martha Miller, a teenage housekeeper who worked at Holy Rosary Church, came to him with devastating news. She was pregnant. The 17-year-old girl stubbornly refused to reveal the father's identity, leaving Father Edward in an impossible position. Determined to avoid another scandal, Father Edward arranged for Martha to stay at St. Joseph's Hospital in Ann Arbor until the baby was born and could be placed for adoption. He promised to transport her back home after 6 weeks, ensuring the entire situation remained confidential. The Polish community's reputation seemed secure once again. But during the January 24, 1919 return journey from Ann Arbor, Father Edward made a crucial mistake. Perhaps feeling the weight of his secrets, or seeking to share his burden with someone who had also experienced trauma, he confided in Martha about Sister Janina's discovered remains. He told her about finding the nun's bones beneath the church, including the shocking detail about the fetus. Martha remembered Sister Janina well, the singing nun who loved walking through the woods, whose outgoing personality had seemed unusual for a woman of faith. When Sister Janina had disappeared in 1907, many community members had whispered that she had simply left religious life, unable to adapt to their conservative community's expectations. But Martha's 6 weeks alone in Ann Arbor, giving birth to her child and facing the reality of giving the baby away, had transformed her. She had gained confidence and inner strength during this difficult period. The young woman who returned to Isadore was no longer the frightened teenager who had hidden her pregnancy. This newfound courage led Martha to make a decision that would change everything. She confessed to her father, Joseph Miller, revealing 2 explosive secrets. Father Edward was the father of her baby, and Sister Janina's bones had been found under the church. The truth about both scandals could no longer be contained. Joseph Miller wasted no time in contacting Sheriff Kanukin. The revelation that Father Edward had impregnated a teenage parishioner was shocking enough, but the news about Sister Janina's discovered remains reopened a case that had remained unsolved for over a decade. Father Edward's world collapsed swiftly. He was immediately removed from Holy Rosary and sent to St. Bonaventure Monastery in Detroit to face ecclesiastical trial. His punishment seemed remarkably lenient considering the gravity of his actions. 30 days at a small church in the Kentucky foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains, followed by reassignment to the Warsaw District in Cleveland, Ohio, where he would work under Father Marian J. Orzakowski at the parish of Immaculate Heart of Mary. But Father Edward's downfall was only the beginning. The investigation now turned to those who had been present during Sister Janina's original disappearance in 1907. Authorities summoned Father Andrew Bieniawski and his housekeeper Stanislawa Stella Lipczynska from Manistee for questioning, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation with the past. The interrogation of Father Andrew Bieniawski and Stella Lipczynska revealed a stark contrast in their alibis. Father Andrew's fishing expedition to Carp Lake on August 23, 1907, was well documented with multiple witnesses, effectively clearing him of suspicion. However, Stella's inability to provide a solid alibi, combined with her well-known animosity toward Sister Janina, made her the prime suspect. Stella found herself imprisoned in the Leland jail, where Sheriff Knukin employed psychological torture tactics that would be considered illegal today. He confiscated her rosary beads, severing her connection to faith during her most vulnerable moments. In a particularly cruel manipulation, the sheriff claimed he could show Stella where Sister Janina was, then led her to a candlelit room where the nun's bones were displayed on a table, with the skull rigged to move its jaw while a voice repeated, "You killed me." The authorities planted a Polish-speaking, female detective, Mary Talika, in Stella's cell, posing as another prisoner. Talika later claimed that Stella had confessed to the murder, providing a detailed account of stunning Sister Janina, digging a hole under the church, and repeatedly striking the nun's head with a spade when it wouldn't stay buried. At the July 29, 1919 trial, the Leland courtroom overflowed with spectators, including reporters from Chicago and New York. Stella's daughter Mary sobbed throughout the proceedings, having traveled from Milwaukee with her husband John Flees, ironically a relative of Jacob Flees who had helped bury Sister Janina's remains. The trial was complicated by the mysterious appearance of a letter signed Protestant Pup, claiming Sister Janina had simply left religious life. Handwriting experts determined that Dr. Fralick, who had treated Sister Janina privately, had written the letter. This evidence suggested Dr. Fralick might have been involved in Sister Janina's death, possibly through a botched abortion, but Judge Martin Brown excluded the letter from evidence. Despite questionable evidence and coercive interrogation methods, Stella was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. The 1920 appeal to the Michigan Supreme Court failed because the crucial Protestant Pup letter had never been properly entered into evidence. Father Andrew Bieniawski became Stella's unlikely champion, working tirelessly for her release. In 1927, he successfully appealed to outgoing Governor Alex Groesbeck, who paroled Stella after 8 years of imprisonment. Remarkably, she moved to Milwaukee and became a housekeeper for the Felician Order of Nuns, the same religious community Sister Janina had belonged to. Stella lived until 1961, dying at age 92, having spent her final decades serving the very religious order whose members she had been convicted of murdering. The case remains controversial, with many believing that the real killer was never brought to justice and that Stella became a convenient scapegoat for a crime she may not have committed. The tragedy of Sister Mary Janina continues to resonate more than a century later, serving as a stark reminder of how quickly fear and prejudice can override justice. This case exposes the dangerous intersection of religious authority, immigrant vulnerability, and a legal system willing to accept convenient answers rather than pursue difficult truths. The story gained national attention when playwright Milan Stitt transformed it into The Runner Stumbles in 1971, later adapted into a 1979 television movie starring Dick Van Dyke. However, these fictional interpretations focused on a romanticized priest-nun love affair, completely missing the real tragedy, the likely wrongful conviction of an innocent woman, and the continued mystery of who actually killed Sister Janina. What makes this case particularly haunting is how the tight-knit Polish immigrant community's desire to protect their reputation may have enabled a cover-up. Their silence, while understandable given their precarious position in early 20th century America, ultimately served to obscure the truth and deny justice to Sister Janina. Today, Holy Rosary Church stands as a testament to the community's enduring faith. The magnificent brick church that Father Edward envisioned was finally built in 1923, complete with those 13 stunning stained-glass windows from Franz Xavier Zettler. The community chose to focus on the future rather than dwell on past tragedies, a decision that allowed them to thrive for decades. Yet, questions persist. Was Stella Lipczynska truly guilty, or was she a convenient scapegoat? Did Dr. Fralick's suspicious letter writing indicate deeper involvement? Could the real killer have been someone else entirely? Someone whose identity died with the secrets buried in that church basement? Sister Mary Janina deserved better than the abbreviated life she received and the decades of mystery that followed her death. Her story reminds us that behind every cold case lies a human being whose life mattered, whose death deserved proper investigation, and whose memory deserves our continued attention. If this case moved you, please like this video and subscribe for more investigative stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe justice was truly served? The truth may be buried with Sister Janina, but her story continues to demand our attention and our commitment to seeking justice, no matter how much time has passed.